My name is Ethel Popper from the University of Johannesburg, and I will be your host for this webinar. Again, thank you so much for being part of this webinar. We'll be talking about strengthening the UK West wood supply chain, looking at challenges, opportunities, and future growth. The webinar is hosted by the University of Johannesburg Center of Applied Research and Innovation in the Built Environment, that is UJ Karimbi, and the university's Process, Energy, and Environment Technology Station, that is UJ PITS, as part of the Wood to Wood project. The aim of this webinar is to share best practices on wood waste upcycling from across the world. And this time we're learning from the UK. But before we start the part on the UK wood recycling, I would like us to get a bit of information on the Wood to Wood project. And we have Professor Innocent Musonda from UJ Karimbi to tell us about the project. Prof. Musonda is a full professor of construction project management and director of UJ Karimbi. He conducts research in the built environment, digital transformation, sustainable built environment, and construction health and safety. And Prof. Musonda is the lead investigator in the Wood to Wood project at the University of Johannesburg. Welcome, Prof. You have about 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, welcome to today's conversations. And yeah, just a little bit about the Wood to Wood project. Much of the time is allocated on this webinar to our colleagues, Ms. Julia, as well as Vicky, just to share with us their experiences on how they have been navigating, wood waste management, and they'll touch on key issues such as skills and policies. But from the Wood to Wood project itself, University of Johannesburg is part of the 23 consortium partners, and this project is supported by the European Union. Is trying to look at how we can recover wood waste from construction, demolition, as well as furniture waste, and upcycle it into more valuable products such as new construction materials and others. There are a number of challenges along the way in trying to achieve that. One of those is the contamination of the wood waste. But of course, there is also the other issue of policy and skills. But specifically, the project is trying to look at how we can use technology first to sort, separate, and convert some of these waste into much more usable construction materials. And as I indicated, there's also the aspect of policies and the skills. So in a nutshell, the project aims to recover from construction demolition waste as well as furniture waste, a material that we can be able to use later on in the construction industry. And let me, at this stage now, invite, I think it's Julia, who's going first, just to take us through their experiences. The purpose of this webinar, in a nutshell, we have dubbed it best practice exchange information. We want to hear how they have navigated some of the challenges that the industry in the UK, for example, has faced, and then we can learn from there and have an opportunity to ask questions relative to our own project on Wood to Wood. So that's about the project and about the webinar this afternoon. I think over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Professor. First of all, actually, let's just move the slide on. I think I'm going to ask Vicky to introduce herself, and then I'll give a bit of my background before we move on to the webinar itself, if that's okay. So Vicky, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, sorry, as it is now. So my name is Vicky Hughes. I am the current Senior Vice President of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, and also the Technical Lead for the Wood Recyclers Association. I've been in wood recycling now for over 20 years and was owner-operator of one of the largest wood collection and processing businesses in the UK. And I have more recently been involved in a lot of projects around fire prevention plans, so policies and protocols. And the whole process of this has been about raising standards in the sector, trying to raise the standards, trying to ensure we get the most value out of the wood, the materials, but also ensuring that we do that safely and responsibly for the environment. Thanks, Julia.
Hey, thank you. And yeah, I'm Julia Turner, the Executive Director of the Wood Recyclers Association. Hopefully you can see why we have Vicky on board as our technical lead, because she's the one who has the experience on the ground. My background is actually marketing and business development, but I first joined the environmental sector and was introduced to the waste wood industry in 2004. After being in the tire industry actually for a number of years. I then worked for a environmental charity called RAP and had a variety of roles with them, and then rejoined the wood sector in 2016 when I came on board as exec director of the WRA. And I was surprised at that point how far the industry had moved forward and the professionalism of the industry. And I think it's fair to say that that's continued to evolve. So hopefully today we'll be able to share some of the best practice that we have in the UK. For the next sort of 30 to 40 minutes, we plan to cover a little bit about the WRA and the UK waste wood market today. What types of waste would go where and why that is, some of the challenges and barriers that we faced, and what the kind of future holds for us. And then Vicky specifically, although she's going to cover some of those aspects too, is going to look at the wider waste and resources industry in the UK and the current skills shortage and what needs to happen to improve that. And then we can answer any questions you have at the end. We can answer them throughout the presentation too, but someone might need to make me aware that you've got a burning question, because I can only see the presentation at the moment. So first of all, if we just quickly look at the Wood Recyclers Association. So we were established in 2001, and in fact next year it's our 25th anniversary. We were set up by a small group of wood recyclers in response to some regulatory concerns they had over something called packaging recovery notes. Very strangely, that's back on the agenda now, but we'll come on to that. We, from that kind of small group of members, we've grown to represent the whole of the waste wood supply chain with just over 120 members. And we represent 90% of all waste wood that is processed within the UK. When I say that we represent the whole supply chain, that's from the collectors of waste wood, so the large waste management companies that run household waste recycling centres in the UK, skip operators who collect construction demolition waste. Through our core membership is still wood processors, so recyclers. And then all of our end markets are represented. So the panel board manufacturing industry, biomass operators, animal bedding manufacturers. And then we have the reuse sector represented through a network of around 25 reuse hubs across the UK. And also pallet refurbishment companies and all the kind of service sector to our industry, so equipment manufacturers, insurance companies, consultancies, etc. We have reciprocal membership with a number of key other trade associations and other organisations, one of which actually is BAV, our German counterpart, who I believe you've also spoken to, Chartered Institute of Waste Management, and another one of key interest is the Confederation of Forest Industries, because we see ourselves very closely linked to the forestry sector as well. We've now become the recognised voice for our industry. We work really closely with government bodies and agencies and the regulators, and our focus is always on driving standards forward. So coming on to the UK waste wood industry, the Wood Recyclers Association supports the waste hierarchy. So we want to see reuse and, well, prevention first, then reuse, then recycling, and then recovery with energy and heat. We believe we're a great example of the circular economy. And what is clear is that the grade and the quality of waste wood, as you've already talked about, does decide the possible end use of that material. We can share this kind of information afterwards, but we have a grading system in the UK which very closely matches the grading system that is used in Germany too. And we would hope that this can be used more widely, actually, so that we don't reinvent the wheel. But grade A material is what we call clean and treated, predominantly packaging waste wood or pre-consumer waste wood, so offcuts of virgin material. Grade B is what we call business waste, and is waste wood that tends to be solid wood. Grade C comes from household sources and quite often has board products within it as well, so things like MDF. And we should probably say at this point that quite often grade B and C, if your material has some of the grade C material in it, then it would be called grade C. And then grade D is the truly hazardous material, that things like telegraph poles, railway sleepers, creosote treated material, of which there is very little in the UK. We estimate there's probably less than 1%. And that has been kind of further proven through work we've done on waste wood classification here. Vicky will explain more about the grading and about the types of wood and what they look like, so I won't go into more detail on that at the moment. In terms of the UK waste wood market, the highlighted column here is our 2024 stats, and we collect these by talking to our members, who represent 90% of the market, and other associations, to extrapolate from the figures that they give us on what material has come in, so how much waste wood has flowed in that particular year and which end markets it's gone to. And as you can see, the amount of material processed came down slightly in 2024, and that was due to a couple of reasons. One was that a major panel board manufacturing plant shut down in 2023, and that had an impact on the amount of wood that was going into the panel board sector. But also the construction and demolition sector, particularly new housing, has seen a downturn in the UK, and so the amount of panel board manufactured has actually come down, and the amount of animal bedding, again due to the weather here in the UK being a lot better than it is normally, has come down slightly, and avian flu. But again, I'll come on to that in a minute. So the chart on the left shows how the market has evolved over the last 7 years. And And you can see that we're in a great position in the UK in that nearly all of the waste wood that we generate domestically has a well-developed, environmentally compliant end market here in the UK too. So 65% goes into energy recovery, usually with heat as well. 21% goes into the manufacturing of panel board. 7% goes into what we call added value markets, so animal bedding, equine surfaces, and other recycling and reuse. The export market has reduced over the last few years as the markets in the UK have become stronger. And so exports, imports netted off represents 5%. And then what we call small scale biomass, really due to not knowing another word for it, but this is the kind of energy recovery which could take place on a business's site, for example, but can only use the clean untreated material, represents 2%. So the key kind of takeouts from our 2024 stats are that waste wood arisings have remained fairly static at 4.5 million tonnes. Could have been slightly less due to the downturn in the construction market. 96% of all waste wood was processed in 2024. Our members accounted for 3.9 million tonnes of that, so just over 90%. As I said, the kind of large scale IED Chapter 4 compliant biomass continued to be the main end user, and that is due to the fact that they take the kind of lower quality grade C type material that can't be recycled due to its heavy board content, and they play a great role in the UK in terms of delivering secure, low carbon baseload power. The panel board sector is still a major end user and actually was the first user of waste wood in the UK, and is the biggest market for recycled waste wood, accounting for 21%. And animal bedding, although it was down in 2024, has continued to be a major player too. Pallet refurbishment and reuse of wooden items through local authority reuse hubs. We know that this is growing, but we can't currently report on exact figures in this area, and that's something that we're trying to work on. I've already talked about export and small scale biomass, but yeah, for 2025, the market is still in great shape. You may have heard that we're currently experiencing some oversupply due to some unplanned and planned outages at our power plants, and reduced offtake by our panelboard manufacturing sites. But we believe that will be resolved by the end of this year, and that again 2025 will be a good year for us. So yeah, I think I said at the beginning, we think we're a great example of the circular economy. From a net zero perspective, the panelboard sector sequestered 1.1 million tonnes of carbon in 2024. The biomass sector saved 701,000 tonnes of CO2, and if they were able to retrofit carbon capture and storage, they will be able to save 3.6 million tonnes. From an energy security point of view, our biomass facilities provide 470 megawatts of low carbon baseload power per annum. So that's enough to supply 840,000 UK homes and is equivalent to 3.3 terawatt hours. And then as a whole, our sector contributes 2.1 billion per annum to the UK, and also employs almost 11,000 people. So you can see where the waste wood comes from, where it goes to. We could be an even better example of the circular economy in action, and we'll explain a little bit more about what we want to see to make that happen over the next few years. But first of all, I'll just hand over to Vicky to explain a bit more about the types of wood, where it goes, and why.
Thanks, Julia. I think I'm going to do the whole next slide, please. Sorry. Is that stuck on the same? There we go. Thank you. Yeah. So as Julie's explained, one of the biggest developments in terms of making the most of the waste wood that arose in the UK was actually defining the grades of material that we could take and process. Finding a commonality of language was really important. And certainly when I first started, there was lots of people almost talking the same language in terms of what they saw as a grade A material, but it was confusing. So it was confusing for the people that generated the wood. And so that is the building and construction companies, that was the skip companies, that was the waste management companies, because dependent on who they took their waste wood to, they might be asked for a different grade or given a different specification. So one of the first things that the WRA did was standardize the terminology and ensured that any customers can get visibility of what those grades are, which makes collecting it much easier, but more importantly means that as the end users became more established, the end markets, it allowed the end market, the buyers of those materials, to be able to be very specific about what they needed. So they could say, we need grade A, and they would know that that grade A was the same, whether they bought it in Scotland or whether they bought it in London. That meant for the first time we had that joined up visibility of materials coming in and where they were going out to. So a very important step. You can see here some wastewood skips. Typically material in the UK is collected in skips, and it can be collected on construction and demolition sites. Construction sites will sometimes have an area for clean material where that can be reused, and that is being more and more pushed in terms of trying to make the most out of the resource. So they will have a place where they can store material, fresh material, and then they may have a skip where they've put their mixed wood. That in some cases then will go to sites where they will segregate again and again, pull out more of the cleaner material, which will go for reuse. And if it's clean packaging, we'll go for animal bedding. But you can see that the vast majority of the material comes in mixed loads. I think the other thing to say is in terms of volumes of material, there is significantly more volume of the lower grades than there are of the clean grades. And again, that's what in a way adds value to them, because they are needed. Those clean grades are needed for animal bedding, small scale biomass and reuse. So actually the segregation and the identification of where they're coming from has also been something we've done quite a lot of work on. They also attract different prices in terms of their disposal costs. So in the UK, we charge for disposal for wood for the lower grades. In some cases, at some times of year, and in some locations, that's about as vague as I can be, we actually pay for clean wood. So we pay to actually get the cleaner grades of material, but it is very seasonal in terms of our offtake. We use a lot more wood in winter, obviously because the big plants are running more in winter, and it's generated in summer. So it really does come down to making sure the grades are the correct grade that you bring into the site and you know where it's coming from, and then making sure it goes out to the right and the best use at the end market. Next slide, please, Julia. So again, the other point that we tried to do is to define language in terms of size of material. This became more apparent when we were working on the changes in the permitting, the UK permitting regulations, where it became a requirement for every site to have a fire prevention plan. And what we quickly worked out was that people outside of the wood sector talk about wood as a generic term. And actually wood waste comes from lots of different sources. we've already talked about the fact that there are 4 different grades, but there's also different sizes of material, and the size of material on the inbound is very important, but it's also important in terms of how you store material, how you process material, and how you clean material. So these are just some examples of unprocessed wood waste. So it's large particle sizes, and most of this material here looks like it's come from construction sites. But actually, if you get these from household waste sites, they would have tables, chairs, furniture, things that are unusable as a combination of these skips. Next slide, please, Julia. So in terms of the material sizes, again, as I say, the 2 principles that we've got, the WRA have raised standards across the sector are around making sure we understand the grade of wood. So what wood goes into what grade, and then making sure that we understand the size of wood so that we can ensure it goes to the right end market. So here we talk about pre-crushed. So pre-crushed is basically, in terms of, from our perspective, is taking it down in the broadest sense from a table to something that's around A4 or below. So that you can see on the where it says pre-crushed, that's actually normally been through one process of breaking down, basically of shredding of some sort. You then go to the next size down, which is the panel board and biomass type grade of material. You can see that's obviously been gone through another process, another shredder, and that actually also will have had metals, fabric, plastics, any non-wood materials would have come out through that process. Now, biomass plants, I should say, and panel board mills actually can also take pre-crushed, and the size and the scope of what is needed from a product perspective for biomass and panel board mills is now defined by the board mills or the panel board or the biomass plants themselves. So they have specifications which they share with their suppliers, and the suppliers will basically make to that requirement. The next size down is animal bedding, and in terms of animal bedding, again, it does depend which processor you're using, but this is just for demonstrating each of these sizes have different markets. So animal bedding is typically less than 10 mil, and it is dependent on what end market it's going for. It's gone through a very strict cleaning process at this point, where all metals, all contamination has been removed. It's more of a homogeneous size. You will see that in terms of the pictures. That's to ensure when it's being used, actually, that the animals get the best use of this material. Waste wood animal bedding is some of the best on the market in terms of, and yes, I know I might be slightly biased, but it does the job better than a lot of the virgin products, because of the nature of the waste wood, and also because of the nature of the way that it's been taken down to that small particle size. And finally is fines. Fines are usually what comes off through the biomass panel board chip process. So they want bigger pieces of wood, because that actually burns better. It gets the calorific value quicker. They don't really want the fines material. So actually, over the last 15 years, the fines production in the UK has reduced significantly to almost nothing, because the plant and machinery suppliers worked out that that was actually a problem for the processors to move off their sites. So actually, a lot of the plant and equipment has been changed to ensure we get the first 3 sizes in the plant and in the process. Next slide, please, Julia. So Julia briefly touched on the end markets, and this is just some visible kind of examples thereof. Another key part of the process that we've put in is ensuring that your inbound material specification, you know what you're getting before you get it. So there's a lot of emphasis put on acceptance criteria. Know what you're getting before you get it. Confirm the grade of material the customers are bringing in. That allows the sites and the processors to be able to manage their inbound material much better. So that's just a graphic demonstration where actually on a lot of sites there are people picking products we don't want. So we don't want black bag rubbish, we don't want general rubbish or plastics or fabrics. So that will be important to take out at this stage, because as you can imagine, one plastic bag at this stage is one item. If that is processed through any of the other chip sizes, you will end up with thousands of tiny pieces of plastic, which just contaminates the material. It can be managed. It's not the end of the process, but it's just better if you can take out any heavy contamination at the beginning. I mentioned animal bedding, and recycled wood actually were we were very early on, actually, when Julia and her other guys as RAP was very supportive of the waste wood sector and trying to get us to look at alternative markets for this material. This is before biomass actually became the largest off-taker. And so an awful lot of money was put into taking that chipped material and taking it down to an animal bedding grade, which requires additional processing. That plant you can see on the side, it requires it to be screened even more. It requires it to be basically hammered to a smaller size. But the net result of that is that actually the waste wood market for animal bedding in the UK for horses, poultry, cattle is actually quite well defined, and a good market for our products. There is a good revenue in that business, but it is an extra there's lots of extra processing needs to take place and extra testing. You can see there one of the branded horse bedding bales. They're sold all over Europe in terms of one of the highest quality animal horse bedding you can buy. Again, picture there of a biomass plant. Biomass has been the reason that most of the waste wood in the UK doesn't end up in landfill. So Julia mentioned the numbers of 4.5 million. If we didn't have biomass as the place that will take all of the rest of our material, actually there would be an awful lot of it going to landfill. So whilst we actively encourage reuse and we actively encourage segregation and to use the higher grades of wood to process into higher products, biomass is the one that catches all the material and ensures that that material keeps flowing throughout the whole of the year. And the bottom picture is just a representation of panel board. The panel board, we don't produce the board itself. The processors, the wood processors basically make chip to a specification that is sold to the board mills, and the board mills then make more MDF, more chipboard, more panel board, dependent on what type of plant they have. So it's as Julia said, it's a really balanced market. We have worked really hard to develop the end markets and the processes to use all the grades throughout all of the seasons. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with my voice now, but hopefully it'll hold out. So yeah, I was just going to look at some of the challenges and the barriers we faced. Obviously, one of them Vicky has already picked up on, in that infrastructure needed to be developed to use waste wood in the UK. Hang on to the wrong thing now. There we go. So you'll see that initially in 2000, for example, there were very few markets for waste wood. Panel board was using about 500 tons, and then gradually their usage increased, and then the other markets came on board as well. But it wasn't really until further down the line that the biomass sector grew through the government introducing a subsidy which supported energy recovery using biomass. And so you'll see that initially a lot of waste wood actually went to landfill, and that's obviously what we want to avoid. Recovery from 2018 onwards became a substantial user, and that was pretty key, because a lot of the work that was done actually through the WRA and supported by RAP with infrastructure development showed that the lower quality waste wood just wasn't suitable for recycling. And even though lots of different options were looked at, for example, in how you could put MDF back into MDF, and that's still something that is being worked on, at commercial scale, that just wasn't possible. So all of these end markets are essential if you're going to use all of your domestically produced waste wood. And at the moment, we're in a situation where the renewable obligation certificate, so this was the subsidy that UK government gave to our biomass operators, starts to come to an end from 2027 onwards. And because of the maintenance of the equipment required in the biomass sector and the investment that is required to introduce carbon capture and storage to make those facilities truly a great example of net zero, they will need alternative support. And until such time that a model exists for them to adapt to carbon capture and storage, we are asking for some transitional support from government to support them. Otherwise, we could be in a position, so the position we're in at the moment is 4.5 million tonnes of waste wood generated in the UK. 1.5 million tonnes of that is either recycled or reused, but the remaining 3 million tonnes can only be used in energy recovery. And if that subsidy ends from 2027 onwards, you'll see from these graphs here that that could mean that up to 3 million tonnes by 2038 could come back onto the market. And worst case scenario, go to landfill, but the most likely scenario is it will be exported if those markets exist to export to, and that would mean that we would lose the material. And what's more, we'd probably be buying that energy back through interconnectors back into the UK. So this is one of the areas that we are asking for support from UK government. And yeah, just to reiterate, this is a big risk for us that if that 3 million tonnes is put in jeopardy, then that would mean that some of the benefits that we currently offer to the circular economy and to net zero, all of these benefits here could be lost. One of the other key risks is that the waste hierarchy isn't always respected. So there need to be drivers in place to make sure that the high quality clean waste wood is better segregated, that it's reused in the first instance, and that it's recycled ahead of recovery. Because if it is recycled into panel board, for example, further down the line, that panel board can be used for energy recovery. So we want to see waste wood as a resource kept in use for the longest period possible. Some of the other kind of challenges that we faced, our environmental regulators came to us with an issue back in 2018, asking us to prove that the grading system that we were using in the UK and the fact that there was very little hazardous waste wood reported, that there was evidence there to prove that. And whilst we had evidence at the output stage, so once our recycling members had processed waste wood, a lot of that material is tested before it goes to the end use of panel board, biomass and animal bedding. The environmental regulators wanted to make sure that that testing happened at the front end of the process. And whilst that would be impossible for every waste wood processor to do that on their sites, we and they worked together on a collaborative project to make sure that we had done that testing to prove what the different grades of waste wood were, which end markets they should be going to, and what the amount of hazardous wood was. So we did some initial desk research and sampling, which was completed in 2020, and that resulted in our regulators issuing 2 regulatory position statements and us producing some industry guidance. And then over the next 4 years, again, we worked collaboratively with the environmental regulators, but also with representatives from industry, so people representing local authorities, particularly the construction, demolition sector and the wider waste skip operator businesses. to do further testing to support the outcomes of that initial work. And after 6 years and a lot of grey hairs on Vicky and my behalf, Vicky led a lot of this work and also led all the technical kind of testing aspects and the analysis of the results. The regulators were satisfied that the amount of hazardous wood in both household and demolition waste streams was very, very small, and it was coming down. The regulatory position statements were withdrawn, and this meant that we could produce finalised guidance where every single waste wood item that goes through the waste stream is defined as to whether it's clean and untreated, so grade A, treated and non-hazardous, so grade B or grade C, or treated and hazardous, so grade D. The only exception to this was any waste wood coming from heavy industrial buildings still has to be assessed and tested. And actually the WRA, through this work and through Vicky's work with our laboratory members, developed a specific test that can be done to establish this rather than using the broader and very expensive WM3 guidance, which I believe exists across the UK. So a whole host of guidance was produced for our members and toolkits, as well as the final guidance that is on our website. And I think this could be useful in other countries to avoid kind of reinventing the wheel, because you can see that every single waste wood item is covered and where it comes from, and each page looks at how that has to move, what the European Waste Code is for that item, and how it is classified. We've also had other kind of regulatory issues, and working with the Health and Safety Executive, we developed some guidance for our members on wood dust best practice. And we've also done a lot of work on how it is best to store waste wood. And again, Vicky was instrumental in writing some initial guidance on how you prevent fires on waste wood sites. And we've more recently, based on the knowledge that has been gathered over the last 5 years, developed some updated guidance to allow our members to store waste wood when it's required over the summer period, so that they have optimum use in the winter. So we're still not perfect, and we're still asking government to do more for us. We're particularly asking them to do more to promote the waste hierarchy and to develop policies that will support that. We're working with the construction sector to make sure that they segregate waste wood and reuse where possible. Again, we're working with others, and we're hoping that the digital waste tracking, which is coming in the UK, will help this aspect of segregating more of the cleaner waste wood for recycling and keeping the waste wood in the supply chain for longer. And as I said earlier, we're continuing to lobby for biomass policy that will ensure that that 3 million tonnes is kept within the UK. Specifically, we've been looking at how we can increase wood packaging recycling targets, because I believe across Europe these have traditionally been quite low, and that was introduced into the UK. That those packaging targets need to be kept higher to encourage cleaner waste wood to be separated. We're continuing to work on making sure our regulators are risk-based and proportionate, and that we get flexibility on storage. And we're doing lots more work, as I said, with the forestry industry and the Confederation of Forest Industries to make sure there is more tree planting in the UK, and to make sure that more timber is used in construction, so that we protect our waste wood supply chain into the future. I'll hand over to Vicky now to look at the kind of wider issue of the skills shortage across the resources and waste sector.
Thanks, Julia. I'm conscious of time as well, so I will rattle through these, but I understand that you'll get sight of the slides. So if there's anything particularly that is of interest in the kind of the broader skills section, then just let us know. Sorry, can I get the next slide, Julia, please? And one more, thank you. So I think the first thing to say, this is on the basis of the wider waste sector in the UK. The resource and waste sector is actually the single largest employer in the green economy, and we account for just short of 160,000 full-time equivalent roles. That's the measure that's used, which is about just short of 23% of all green jobs for 2023. What we know already is that we need significant improvement in that number, and the types of roles are changing. So between the intensification of the skills demand, the policy changes, circular economy transition, we're basically going to be short of people. At the moment, the estimate is around 83,000 jobs will be needed. And as you can see on there, there's a mix of different types of roles. So what is it we're trying to do? We're trying to encourage more people to come into the sector, but also to come in with different skills, or to upskill in terms of what they currently do now into some of the newer technologies that we need. Next slide, please, Julia. So what are the gaps and challenges? As I say, the insufficient training. It's that there aren't enough trainers in this sector. The training has changed, the requirements have changed. It also is, there's an awful lot of emerging technology, and circular economy is something that, whilst we've used the words a lot for a long time, not necessarily that well known in terms of how to make that practical on the ground. So this is new things in our sector, and we're going to have to get new trainers and new people involved in developing that. There's been uncertainty and delays in policy, and without that clarification, people don't invest. They don't know what to train in because they don't know which way things are going. Some of those are about to land in the next couple of years, so that hopefully will make that visibility better. Our workforce demographic is aging. Basically, we have an aging workforce in the waste and resource sector. So we have a low number of young entrants, and we're underrepresented in terms of women and ethnic minorities, something we're working really hard to try and change, but it takes time. One of the reasons that we are is because actually there is a low perception of our sector. It's seen as being unskilled, dirty, unattractive compared to other green sectors. So we need to change that. That takes time again, but we are trying desperately to make sure people understand. The terminology has changed from waste to more around environment and green skills. So again, hopefully that will bring more people in. And again, one of the things, the problem in the UK is training, on the job training for these types of skills in this sector is really difficult to achieve. It requires a lot of companies to put in big resources, which not every company has got. Next slide, please, Julia. So in terms of the opportunities for this sector, there is a list there. Reuse, repair and remanufacturing capacity. We all know that actually using this material, any materials in the waste sector, better starts with the design process. Don't design them in. The waste sector in the UK has been very much about taking the waste that we're given and doing really good things with it. What we're trying to say is don't produce it as waste in the first place. So there's a lot of emphasis going on. How do we stop it being waste? How do we design in reuse? And how do we ensure that that circular economy discussion is taken at the beginning? That means we have to invest in different skills. We have to look at how we can invest further up the supply chain. We talk about digital and AI operations. There's some huge technological changes in the waste sector, which means that we can be more efficient. It takes less people, but you still need people with those skills. So again, we need to look at what are the skills that we need for a digital and the data capacities that this sector is going to need going forward. We talk about wanting to become a compliance and ESG hub. This is about making sure that we become, in the UK, we're very strong on our compliance. We always have been, but actually what we need to do is demonstrate that more to more international markets. That also means we need new skills. We need new auditing skills. We need carbon accounting, different kind of skills than we've currently got. We're looking at becoming a net zero workforce. So again, it's about trying to understand and make it really visible, not just waste, not just what we're left with, but actually how we can use that, either the waste or the resource, to move that net zero conversation forward. And the final thing, and the one that I think is really important, is about attracting new diversity into the workforce. How do we get more people into this sector who don't understand what we do? And I don't just mean people who drive vehicles or collect waste, but actually new regulators, new technologies, marketeers, salespeople. There's a whole raft of new industry and new roles that are going to emerge in this sector that we need to be pushing. And I think finally we're asking about what we want from our government, and we've given them basically a list of things. A green skills roadmap. Tell us what the policies are going to be so that we can map out where our gaps are and then go and get those people, which will include sector awareness, which does need funding of some sort. It means building the infrastructure for trainers, and it actually also means making sure that entry into our sector is easier. At the moment, it isn't that easy. It isn't very visible, so we need to get more support on that. And finally, to get clarity on these policies that have been hovering around for a while, but now need to basically give us the incentives to get more people in this sector, more businesses to invest in this sector, which will generate more roles. I think I've raced through that, so I apologise, but I'm hoping that that's given you a flavour of some of the key things that we are looking for in terms of the skill gap in the UK. That's it, I think, on those, isn't it, Julia? Is that us? There we go. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know whether there are any immediate questions. Also, it's probably worth saying, using my the next slide, that there is lots more information about the UK waste wood sector on our website. And particularly, we've just produced a 2025 annual review looking backwards at 2024 and further forwards as well. And that has all of this information and lots more in there too. So if there's a link on here to that, and I'd urge you to have a look at that. But yeah, back to questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julia and Vicky. Yeah, it's a wonderful presentation. I don't know if there are questions. Maybe Ethel will guide us.
Yes, if you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat, and Nomfundo will get to it.
Ethel, while we're doing that, I did see one that came that said in South Africa, we don't have machinery and market to make this a success, such as now. From Dolores. I would say, Dolores, we didn't either. We genuinely, when I first started, this market was not a market. It was a group of people who happened to be left with some waste wood, who needed to figure out a way to take it in and make money, which is important, but then also act responsibly with the outputs. So I think that it does, the machinery comes when a lot of the machinery manufacturers in the UK actually developed products in conversation with the wood processors and the waste processors, because they realized that their machinery wasn't necessarily fit for purpose for what we needed at that time. So it was a very collaborative process that's happened and still does. I mentioned fines. Fines were a real issue for our sector. So we went back to our manufacturers of the plant and equipment and said, help, we need not to produce these fines. So they changed their machinery processes over a few years, not a quick fix, but actually the net result is now that we don't have that as an offtake, which was a problem for us to remove. All I would say as well, Dolores, is it's a great journey and very exciting, and hopefully some of the stuff that we've learned on the way will shortcut your process and your route.
And indeed, I noted how you worked collaboratively with the UK government to develop policies, and I agree with you on the standards, something that we will learn on our project, I believe, with our team on our project taking leave there, that's key to bring government on board, or at least ensure that governments have that buy-in into the project.
Yeah, it is really important that everybody has clarity what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes we've certainly found that people who collect waste, wood and generally waste, people who process waste and people who use waste don't talk the same language in terms of their nuances in what they want. So actually the regulators are exactly the same. We spent a lot of time on the projects Julia mentioned. We spent a lot of time just finding common language that we both understood to mean the same thing. So all I would say is the input of that time at the beginning to try and find and ensure that even if you're saying the same words, that they mean the same thing to you, that actually that is the point that is important. Julia mentioned testing. We spent a lot of time believing that testing was being done consistently, but actually, even though we were saying testing and we were using the same language, basically it meant different things to different testing houses. It meant different things in terms of their outputs. So that's the only thing I would say, Professor, is that trying to get the language clarity at the beginning could probably save a lot of time too.
Hi, Julia.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. It's Dolores speaking. Yes, with Professor Innocent and Ethel there, we are looking at kinds of studies that we're looking for, because I have a lot of waste, different areas that we could use, and it's becoming a problem in South Africa. We went out with Ethel and Professor one of the past few weeks to go and have a look at the amount of waste that's been made by the makeshift, I'll put it that way, unregistered, should I say, furniture makers. There's a lot of waste that gets left out there. And it's a pity that we don't have anything at this very stage where we can start working on and getting rid of that's going into landfill. But they say that they burn it. They burn the stuff if they got nowhere to put it, and it's a pity. Instead of us making use of it in a good way, that's what is happening. So I don't know if UJ is actually talking to the government about this, because we've spoken to the CSIR, and they haven't really come back to us on anything there. So I'm not sure if Ethel is speaking to them as well. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, so Dolores is referring to some of the waste that we saw from the logistics, companies packaging quite a lot. As shocking, opened our eyes actually, how much wood waste is there. Yeah, Ethel and Dante.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thanks, Julia and Vicky, for the insightful presentation. I can't help but appreciate the amount of work that has gone into enhancing wood waste from the UK. Well done, and thanks, Dolores, for your comments. I think we've come to the end of our webinar. We've shared a link to a survey in the chat. Please kindly take the survey. This will help us improve future events and also to get feedback on if we've met the aims of this webinar. So thank you everyone for your kind attention. Special thanks to our speakers, and we're also posting links to the Wood to Wood website and the Wood to Wood stakeholder platform on Discord on the chat. Please feel free to reach out and join us. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Um,